So that's our marketing for today. Today is kind of a high-level view at desktop virtualization. I don't know how familiar you guys are. Who here has ever done virtualization? Nobody. You? Okay, good. Yeah, I know you. All right. So today, desktop virtualization is about basically a computer running inside another computer, and so on our desktops, the software that you all were downloading from that machine allows you to run another computer on your machine. So basically, this is your computer, your host, or server, and then you're going to have a guest operating system. So this guest can be anything. It can be a Windows machine. It can be a Linux machine. And any other OS, like pre-built OS that you can think of. It's basically just a way to give resources to something running on your machine. Now, on the software that I gave you today, you're only going to be able to run one machine inside your machine because it's the freeware part of VMware. Those of us that are network admins, we work with servers that run sometimes 30, 40 machines, in 30 to 40 guests on one machine. You say, why do we want to do virtualization? It's all about cost and efficiency, sandboxing, and security. I mean, those are your main reasons why you want to do virtualization. If I have a piece of software that I'm going to install on my Windows machine, and I don't want to do it on the primary machine that I use every day, I'm going to put it on one of my throwaway Windows machines that I have on my set up already as a guest. And so, what we're going to do today is kind of go through a few of the differences between the different virtualization softwares out there, and then we'll do a hands-on where we'll actually install it on your machine if you want, and then we'll kind of go through how that works. So desktop version versus server version. The desktop version, like I was saying, only gets you one machine. Okay, the one machine is good for your everyday use on your laptop. You can buy the I gave you what's called VMware Workstation. They have VMware Workstation Pro that costs money, and you can run several of them on your machine. The real difference between desktop and server will be your amount of machines and your licensing on the machine, but also your features. On your computer, you all have RAM, you all have a hard drive, you have a network card, and you have a processor. This is the basics that run in the back of your machine, right? So the whole purpose of this is to share those resources with that guest machine. So if your server has, or your computer has, let's say 16 gigabytes of RAM, okay? When you start turning on these guests, and you're going to say, when you turn it on, you're going to say, this one right here, I want it to use 8 megs. Well, it just robbed that machine of 16 megs, okay? And the same thing with the processor and so on. Some of the desktop versions are pretty basic about how it uses those resources with that guest operating system, but the server versions do a lot better handling of resources and how it uses them and when it uses them. And that's basically, pricing and features and availability is your real difference between desktops and servers. There is also on the server versions, your host computer can be anything. It can be, they make them for everything. So if you have a Windows machine, like Windows 7, 8, XP, I won't name any of them, but you can also have them for a Linux. Some of y'all are using like a Linux Ubuntu distribution. They also make it for that. There is another system called ESXi. and that's made just for VMware. You put on that OS on a server that's just going to run virtual machines, and so therefore you start to just, because that's the operating system. It's basically a Linux machine, but it's made by VMware for desktop virtualization. This is also for Blade type servers. If y'all are not familiar with Blade type servers, what it does is you have this big machine, and you basically have a bank of RAM, hard drive, well, not hard drive, but network and processor. And then you usually have storage over here, which is your hard drives. Okay? And I think that Joe went through that last time. This is what's used at data centers, where you don't have a bunch of rack servers. You basically then have these little machines all plugged into one cabinet, and that's a Blade server. And if you're not familiar with it, we can talk about it later. But basically, it's just a way to share resources between one machine. This whole cabinet will host a VMware server software like VMware. All right, so then we're going to go over the desktop versions. The two major players in the desktop versions of virtualization. One is Microsoft. They use Virtual PC. It's old. Virtual PC's been around for a long time. I think 2007 is when it came out. I think they're still making it for Windows 8. I have always used the older version. But then there's the other one that's the VMware Workstation. Like I was saying, there's several different versions of VMware Workstation. VMware Workstation Free, which is what we'll be working with today, and then the Pro version, which is paid, and it has a lot more features. The more interesting ones are the server ones, because the server market is more about what these virtualization companies are going after. It's all about licenses and features. There's I misspelled it, Hyper-V, but Microsoft has their version called Hyper-V. That's their hosting environment. There's VMware that's owned by EMC. If you're not familiar with EMC, they just made a bunch of news lately. Dell bought EMC, and EMC has been around for a long time. They're mostly in the storage market, but they've made a big wave in VMware. Dell has some competing products, so we'll see how that plays out in the marketplace. There's some Linux distros out there for it. The VMware does make one for Linux. There's another one that's very popular called Zen. That one's made by a company called Citrix. It's been around for a long time. There's another one called Q and another one called OpenVZ. And OpenVZ, those are kind of lower on the market share place, but you'll find that Hyper-V and VMware are your two big market contenders for virtualization. One of the things that we do in a data center is when we get like an old PC, an old server that needs to stay alive, but the hardware's going out, for some reason we need to upgrade the machines, don't want to put any more money in it, is that we'll get somebody like a PC, or we'll get a server that's out there, and we'll do what's called P2V, physical to virtualization. So you have a physical server, and then you convert it over to a VMware machine, and that machine then can be run as a guest on another server. And so therefore you can, once you P2V it, throw away that old machine, and boot it up on a server, and it's running just in the software inside of it, and everything that's inside of it thinks that it's still sitting on a server, on a physical server that's on a rack, but it's actually running alongside of 30 other virtual machines on a bigger server.
Would that scale automatically? Because I'm wondering, like, when you clone it to like P2B, that like, do you keep the same specs, or you can change it as you go along?
Well, as I was saying, some of the things, one of the reasons why you would P2V it is that A, your hardware's getting antiquated, and B, if you want to upgrade it, but you don't want to buy more RAM for that old PC. So when you do come over, and in the creation portion of the VM, you can tell it how many resources you want to give. You can keep it at the same if you're happy with the performance, if you're upgrading the machine, you know, throw more RAM on it, throw more hard drive on it, throw more processors at it. You got to worry a little bit about the OS, if the OS will handle it. You know, Windows XP, you know, that only holds 4 gigs of RAM. If you want to go, if you give it 8 gigs of RAM, it's worthless. You know, and so same thing with some of the older Windows operating systems. They can only handle so many processors, so much RAM. So, you know, max it out if you want. It's cheap. Okay, so one more thing is that this is not a thin client environment. So a lot of people confuse virtualization with thin clients. And if you don't know what thin clients are, it's a really, really old technology that basically there's nothing on your computer in front of you, and everything is running off of a server, you know, behind in a data center. And that's usually Citrix. VMware also has a product to do that. Mostly everybody that you see is using Citrix. If you go to any bank in town, they'll have a tiny little PC with a screen, and there's nothing running on that PC. It's all being run in a server somewhere else. That server could be using a virtualization environment in order to serve out that software, but this is not a thin client. This is not a thin client software. This is just about virtualization. All right. So any questions so far? No? You got it? You got it so far? All right. So the next part of the presentation that I wanted to do was let's see some. Let's see some that are running. I have a couple of them running on my machines. I also I'm gonna basically remote into some production servers that I manage, so that you can see some that are running. I can't turn them on and off on the production servers because then somebody will be upset that's working right now. But I'll show you some of them real quick. I'm gonna show you the Microsoft version. The Microsoft version, I have the Microsoft version sitting here on my machine. So this is the virtual PC console. You'll see it. If I only have one machine installed on this particular. This is the local machine. This is what I'm talking about as the computer. And then I'm going to show you the guest right now. It shows that I've got one guest running, and I'm going to show you that guest. So obviously you all see that this is a Windows XP machine. And in the background, I have this virtual PC running on it, and it is a Windows 2008 server, I believe. And so I'm gonna log into it. If I can remember the password. And I'll full screen it so that make it look like it's running. So you'll see that I've logged in. Fix that. You can't see the bottom of that.
Oh, you can zoom in and out from there. And then you can zoom back out. So it's
Where did you zoom?
that's
Keystone?
no, Keystone is
Oh.
just bring it down.
All right, so you'll see that this is a different machine than what's running in the background. This is the Windows Server machine that's running as a guest. I use this particular one to run an SQL server, and it's just a test environment for an accounting software that one of my customers uses. So I'm back now to my XP machine. So that's the Microsoft product, Microsoft Virtual PC. And I'm going to show you a workstation. Obviously, I'm logging into a Windows 7 machine. This is actually a machine that's sitting at my house. And I will bring in, this is going to look a lot like the Windows product that I showed you just a second ago. And these are my guests. You probably can't see very well, but these are guests that I can start up. And I'm going to start up, I have a Linux server that I run on that one there. And you'll see it start up here in a second. If you're familiar with Windows, you start recognizing that's the startup screen of a Windows server. That's a guest sitting on a machine that I have at my house. This is what we'll be installing today. Then I will now show you, those two products that I've showed you right now are desktop products, and the next one that I'm going to show you is a server product. You recognize this one too? So this one's an actual VMware sitting on an ESXi machine. It's only got one machine running on this ESXi, and you'll see how much of the resources that's being used. I can shut it down. I can restart it. You basically get to it from another machine. You don't actually I'm not actually on that machine. You connect to it. That was a server one. This one allows you to do several of them. I'm going to show you another one just real quick that has multiple machines running on it. So this one you'll see has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 machines that are installed on it. Right now, only 3 of them are running. You do the same thing. You can restart them from here. You can see them from here. You can also do a console to see them, what they look like. That's on a server. I've got a Windows XP machine running out there for demo purposes. Okay, so everybody gets it so far? Any questions? Okay, so now we're going to do the hands-on, where we're actually going to install it. And I am going to install it with you guys. So you all have a folder that I had you all copy a second ago. And while we're doing that, where are those hard drives? So plug one in, because there's going to be another folder on them that says optional. There's a folder on there called VMware Optional. VMware Optional. I guess they understood it. Okay, so the VMware optional folder, there should be, if you click into it, if you'll copy a folder called ISO on it, we're gonna install a Ubuntu desktop to run on your Windows machine as a guest. So the one that you want to do here. Okay, I put it actually in the essentials folder. Yeah, so there's the ISO. You don't have to copy anything, sorry. You just keep on going. If you all have the essentials folder, you're good to go. So there's a folder in the essentials folder called essentials, and if you can try to install version 12, and if that's too high of a version for your machine, work your way down 7 to 5. It's just, they're all the same thing, they're just different versions. And if you don't have a Windows 7 most up to date, then it may not allow you to install it. But let's try to install the latest one. Admittedly, I don't think that I've seen it since version 7. So we'll just kind of do a next while we install.
Is it easy to do port forwarding on this?
So what we'll go through here in a minute is on the networking part of this. If you use the bridge mode, it basically will use your network card just as if it's a network card on your machine. And so it'll treat this machine as just another machine on your network. And so it'll grab its own IP, its own unique IP that's different than your than your server, and your guest will have a certain IP address. And so on your port forwarding, you would just point it to that IP. So there's two different versions, or there's 3 different versions of networking on a virtual machine. There's what's called individual. Individual basically it isolates the machine network-wise. It can't communicate with the outside world. It can only see the host. And if you have several machines installed on that same VMware, then they can see each other, but they can't go out in the world. Okay. Then there's NAT, and NAT will then give it its own IP scheme that's different than your host, but it can go in and out of the machine. And then the third one is bridge mode, and bridge mode will treat the machine as a unique machine on the network. So just as I was saying, it'll give it, it'll stay in the IP scheme of your network, whatever DHCP your router gets, it will grab an IP from there, or you can put a static IP if you're going to be port forwarding. You can probably put a static.
What's the name of the first one you said?
Individual, and then there's NAT, and then there's bridge.
So would the individual be like the virtual box, or what would virtual box be considered?
Well, I've seen VirtualBox for that, but is it a hosting software?
It's open source virtualization.
So they all work like this. They all work the same way. Friendly tip: if you all use Gmail, if you want to if you want to give away your email address to something, and you worry about spam, you can put a plus symbol right after your normal username, and then any kind of descriptor afterwards, and then it will still arrive in your inbox. And if you start to get too much mail, a bunch of spam, then you can create a filter that says whatever's going to that plus whatever, then you can just say straight to archive or straight to delete. I know Gmail can do it. I don't know if other ones can do it, but I know that Gmail will. Okay, so if you've got it started, you're here. And this is basically your virtualization software running, and it is ready for you to give it a guest. Now, there's the 2 guests that you can put on there is one that you've already created. Like, let's say I have one running over here that you saw on a server that was a a Windows XP machine sitting out there, or that Windows 2008 server that I had out there, and I don't want to go through the whole process of setting up a new one, then you can use an existing one. You just copy the stop the other machine, copy it over, and then go through the create process, and you now have an exact duplicate of the other one. This type of duplication is very popular for the server side stuff. One of the things that we talked about is why do you do this in a server environment? You can do duplicates on the fly. You can run scripts to duplicate machines, and you can also do high availability, so that if the virtual machine goes down for any reason, it'll pop up another version of it right away, so that you have continuous use. Some of these is like within 1 or 2, 3 seconds. If it sees that the machine is frozen up or blue screened or gone down, it'll pop up another one. And there's duplication involved, so you can have virtual machines that are duplicating themselves within seconds, so that if it does go down and it comes up, you basically have hardly any downtime. That's in very high sophisticated data centers. That's why they use this stuff, so that you can have high availability and backup servers going all the time. So today we're gonna create a new virtual machine from scratch, the Ubuntu desktop that I was talking about. You don't have to use Ubuntu desktop. You can download any software that from the internet that's like, that for some reason you have one, like an Ubuntu server, an Ubuntu desktop. If you have a Windows XP machine, you have a Windows 7 machine, there are what's called ISOs out there. ISOs are what basically your DVD is zipped up to be all in one. There is also the process, if it comes with a disk. You're going to see here in a second that when it comes with a disk, I can either choose to install this new virtual machine with an installer disk, like one that comes with the old machine, or you can even have the USB. You just choose the letter of wherever that installer disk is at, and then go next. Today we're going to do the installer disk image file. It's in that VMware Essentials folder that I had y'all do. We're gonna browse to it. Mine is sitting on the desktop. All right, so I have 2 of them downloaded here. There is the i386 version or the AMD 64 version. If you're not familiar of what that means, one's just a 64-bit operating system, one is the 32-bit operating system. The 32-bit operating system will use a lot less resources, but it'll be a lot less powerful. If you have an older machine, I suggest you do the 32-bit just because it won't use as many resources. You remember when we were talking about here that you have a limited amount of resources on your host machine, and if your guests are going to need more than what the host has, then you're going to have a very slow machine and be very upset. So I'm going to do 32-bit today. You choose what you want to do. If you've got a good, powerful machine, go to the 64. I don't trust this particular machine, so I'm going to do the cheaper one. You'll see that it automatically detects what operating system it is. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. What it's actually doing right there is trying to make a determination on how many resources that it's going to need based on a database of what they think it's going to need. They usually try to do some minimums there, so we should have some choices here, a little bit of how many resources to give it. And it's going to, I'm just going to say rename test. You can do whatever you want here. This is the username, just remember it. I'm going to call it test. I'm going to password, password 01, password 01. for the agile.
It's literally
Am I ahead of anybody? Or is anybody behind? Need some help getting to this point? Everybody good? You good? Roger, you good? Your machine?
I'm running it in my mind.
Yeah, all right. I'll wait for them to catch up.
I had a question actually. Is LogMein a standalone company, or is it owned by Microsoft, or is it owned?
No, LogMein is a standalone company. I heard the other day that LogMein bought LastPass. I don't know if that makes any sense, but if y'all are not familiar with LogMein, LogMein is a piece of software that you use in order to get to another machine. It is a paid version. There used to be a free version, but no longer. Some of the free stuff that you see out there is like TeamViewer. If you've got a Microsoft product, you can use remote desktop, but you got forwards and ports and stuff like that. I use LogMein a lot, but we've got several hundred machines that we manage, and so I'm a LogMein fan. I like LogMein also because I can give other people permissions to get onto their machines.
Yeah.
So in other words, if your machine was in my account and I had access to your LogMein, and I have access to your machine that has LogMein client on it, even if it's on my account, I can send you an invite and say, if you can use your machine with LogMein, even though I'm paying for the license. That's the major difference between LogMein and all of the other products that are out there.
I remember using LogMein like way back like in 2006, and the reason why I would use it was because Mac High, the computers I used on camp, and this was way back when MySpace was really popular. It's like you couldn't use MySpace while you're in high school, so I would use LogMein to go to my desktop at home, and then I would surf MySpace.
Yeah, just a second ago, when you all saw me go into those servers and that machine at home and stuff like that, I used LogMein to get into that. I don't know if you all noticed that, but I'm a big fan of LogMein. It just keeps getting more and more expensive though, so. Let me know when you guys are caught up. They're caught up? Okay. Yeah, just remember it.
So I don't know. Internet was slow like back then.
And I'm just going to do next. You can call this anything you want. This will basically be what pops up over here as the name of the machine so that you can use it later. And this is where you basically tell the machine how much hard drive space. Now we're talking about resources again. This is where you tell the machine how big of a hard drive to put onto this virtual machine. It's asking to do 20 gigs. You can do less. You can do more. You can, with certain tools and server versions and stuff like that, you can increase the size of these hard drives, or you can actually add another hard drive later if you want. But just think about this as you're shopping for a computer and you're trying to choose how big of a hard drive you're going to put on it. This is where you do it. Now remember that your host machine only has a certain amount of hard drive space, and if this machine had a 40 gig hard drive, and I can't give this 100 gigs to the virtual machine because you don't have enough resources for that. So you just got to make sure that you're under that level of resource. So it made some choices on here for me. It's going to give it 1 gig of RAM. It's also going to remember the network adapter type that we talked about, bridge, NAT, or individual. It's choosing to do NAT. I usually use bridge because I read a lot of documentation that says that bridged version is faster and has better performance.
So bridge, again, it allows you to go in and out pretty much.
Yeah, so bridge creates an individual machine on your network just as if it's another machine that you plugged into the router and sitting out there.
So you can get from your host to it without having to, you
Don't
can
do anything.
minimize it and you can go from your host.
Yeah, so if on the host, you'll have the little console window. That's what they call what we were looking at a little while ago, where you actually can see the machine and use the mouse to see it. And if you're using like a server that doesn't have a GUI or anything like that, you can telnet into it, or put it into it, or use a web browser to get into it, or whatever. But you would use like its IP address that you assign to it at the very beginning, or you got into the console and configured a static IP. You also can tell it, here's USB controllers and stuff like that. If you'll notice, when I went in there and changed the NAT adapter, I pushed this button that said Customize Hardware. Right here is what we're talking about with the resources guide that it's using right here. They said to me that Ubuntu usually likes to use at least 1 gig of RAM. They also then gave it 1 processor. And they gave it a printer and a display port. These are all of your hardware settings on the machine. And you can go and add more stuff if you want to do more stuff. So graphics, you can add another sound card, you can add another USB controller. USB controller is what basically says when you plug in like a USB hard drive in your machine, I want to be able to see that through the guest machine. So we're going to be ready to go here in a second. I'm going to push finish. So just hints on how to use the software. Just push a bunch of OKs. Basically, it's basically telling you that you've got a bunch of resources that are being assigned to it. And if you saw that in the back where the background, it's trying to install the Linux software. This little screen right here is called the VMware Tools for Linux. VMware Tools is an optional thing that you put onto your machine. Depends on whether you want to do it or not. What that does, it lets you talk to the server side of the machine and give it specific commands to the operating system in the background. Totally your choice whether you want to do it. For me, it all just depends on what the machine is doing. We're going to do that. We're going to remind you later, just so that we don't do that today. You'll see the Ubuntu operating system starting to install in the background. If you actually had a physical machine and you had a DVD in the machine with the Ubuntu installer disk, this is what you'd be seeing on the screen as it starts to install. No, that's LogMein. That's a way to log into something that's not here locally. Okay, so this is what we were talking about earlier. That like let's say that I install a lot of software on my machines, but I got a piece of software that I downloaded that I'm not sure has a virus or not. So what I would do is I'd fire up one of these guest operating systems, install the software on it, see what happens, and if nothing happens, then I'll install it on my machine. That would be a test environment, a way to test what would happen. Let's say I want a Linux machine, and I have certain software that runs a Linux machine, but I only have one computer, and so I still want to run Windows 7 and all of those things on my machine, but I have the need to run Linux software every once in a while. I would install a Linux guest and then run all my Linux stuff on the guest. I have a Windows 7 machine right here. I have certain software that only runs on Windows XP, but I don't want to run Windows XP all the time. So I would create a Windows XP guest, fire up the guest, use that XP software on the XP machine, and then shut it down when I would want to. Those are desktop applications. On a server applications, there's many reasons why people have, in the old days, 10 machines in a rack. If you've seen the pictures of you go into like the data centers and they've got a whole bunch of machines sitting there, well now it's one machine with 10 machines running on it. So here in the background, if you're new or just catching up, you see the Ubuntu desktop running in the background. What's going on? So one of the things that obviously the demo gods are getting to me today, so certain machines can't run virtual environments without turning something on and off on your BIOS. You have to just Google it for your machine and go to the BIOS virtualization, and usually somewhere in your BIOS there'll be a little on and off button that says allow virtualization. And I think that a couple of y'all are having that issue, where it starts to run and again it doesn't go through. Yeah. So if you'll just kind of watch the rest of the demo, but you have to turn that on your machine to virtualization. I got lucky on that Toshiba. I guess it has virtualization turned on. So just nothing with it. You have it there.
Google this. It's already HP enabled BIOS virtualization. Just Google it and it'll give you steps on how to do it on your computer. Or as people answering the questions. So you follow the steps on your computer and you can boot up and do it.
And I think you all are having the same exact issue that we're talking about.
What do you Google?
I typed in HP, whatever brand you have, a computer, and enable BIOS virtualization.
So if you,
Authorization?
yeah, you'll have to Google your machine model or brand, and then you'll have to do what's called enable BIOS virtualization. Every machine calls it something different. I'm more familiar with the Dell one, but I mean, we're almost done. I mean, this is pretty much what would happen. And then after that, now you've got your machine running in the background. You can turn it on and off using that little console that you created the virtual machine on. I also gave you guys, I think, the Microsoft version of this, the virtual PC one. Did y'all get it?
The Horizon 6, right? The version of the VMware?
Yeah, this is version, I think 12 is the one that we just did. But it's a workstation. It's a workstation.
Oh, okay.
So because the server version is called vSphere, and the new version of vSphere is called 6. A lot of people, I haven't seen 6 yet. I've only seen 5. A lot of people say that it's very different. You know, doesn't really matter for this. What y'all saw in the demos, that was vSphere 5 for the servers.
Which one is better, VMware or VirtualBox?
Which was better?
Better.
VMware.
VMware? So what is?
VirtualBox is open source, free.
Oh, okay.
You get what you pay for pretty much.
Yeah.
I started with the VirtualBox, but then on my professional environment, there's no way you can.
VMware VirtualBox is good if you want to play around at home, but VMware you know, there's only one free product out there, basically, for the workstation. You start going into like the more expensive stuff, for server stuff, it gets a lot more expensive, but you get what you pay for. I mean, it works.
You can make a living of VMware. It's tough making a living of VirtualBox, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Hey, you go anywhere, if you go any professional environment, like a bank, you know, major corporate data center, et cetera, they're not going to be using VirtualBox. They're going to be using VMware or Hyper-V. I mean, the Microsoft equivalent of Hyper-V, which is called Hyper-V.
And the setup is the same for both?
If you know the terminology
Oh.
on one of them, you're going to be able to use the same terminology on the other one.
Okay.
Because you're going to see the word NAT, you're going to see the word bridge, you're going to see you're going to see guest, you're going to see, you know, all of these different, you know, vocabulary that you use in one is going to be the same on the other. I've never used Hyper-V in a professional environment. I've always used VMware. All of the, if you buy like the Cisco blades and all that stuff, that's all running VMware.
Oh.
So this is Ubuntu. This is your guest operating system. This is a computer that's running inside this other computer.
Well, this is up running anything that any viruses that go to your computer, you will see it there.
If you installed a piece of software on this environment, that you know, it would infect that environment, unless it's of course a network virus where it starts to look for all the machines on the network.
Then that's something.
Yeah, because these are all machines. Oh yeah, all these machines are connected to it. But you know, there's Mozilla running there.
Please help.